Okay, let's get started. Thank you everybody for coming tonight to our Southwood Homeowners Association general meeting. We had one last year in June outdoors in the by the lunch benches, so it's nice to be indoors and hopefully we'll have a good meeting here and you'll learn some good information from our police officers. So I'm Lori Craig, I'm the president of Southwood, and I hope everyone had a chance to sign in at the tables there. So if you haven't done so, please do so on the way out. And restrooms are across the courtyard area. There's a couple open over there. And we have some water and cookies in the back if you would like to have some of those. And finally, we're going to be live streaming tonight, and there will be a recording at that same link that we sent out for the live stream if you want to rewatch anything. Okay, so first we're going to start with some meeting business for the association. So, and then following that, we'll present our scholarship winner. And then Torrance Police Chief Jay Hart will speak, and then Sergeant Ron Salary will talk about crime trends. Oh, okay. First, Ron Salary is going to speak, and then Chief Hart. So, okay, thank you. All right, so that's the order of things, but first, let's do a Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, so our first order of business is to present the slate of officers for next year's term. We start our term on September 1st, and the officers are going to be, for president, myself, Lori Craig, first VP, Carolyn Bakenbeiner, second VP, Lynn Woike, who's here tonight, third VP, Sue Harrison, recording secretary, Emmy Mudakata Morimoto, corresponding secretary, Val Clark, and she's also here tonight. And Val is one of our original board members since 1976. So that's kind of accomplishment. Our treasurer is Glenda Fukunaga in the back there. And Sergeant at Arms Roberta Stotesbury, who is also a longtime board member. Are you also 76? Or do you know when you started?
Oh, just without.
Oh, well, then 1976?
No, just recent.
Oh, okay. Oh, more recent. Okay, about 4 years ago. All right, thanks, Roberta. All right, so as a formality, we just call now for any nominations from the floor for the offices. And hearing none, this will be our slate of officers for the 2022-23 year. And then you will be able to we'll have elections via email sometime probably later in June. And we just do that by, you just reply with a yes or no if you agree with the slate. Okay, and then so I just wanted to mention our other appointed officers that have helped out a lot throughout the year. Kim Noakes, who does our school board report in the newsletter. Jane Roseman, who does our city council reporting, she's over there. And John Milo Ernst, who's manning our live stream and YouTube live stream tonight, but he usually reports on the Environmental Quality Commission. And Trish Valdez is our historian, and Pat Lewis, hospitality. Ed Candioti is our Park and Rec observer. He's also the chair of that commission, and he also emceed our candidate forum in late April. And Andrea Riley is our Library Commission observer. So I just wanted to mention briefly, if you're not a member, what it means to be a member is that you would get occasional emails about important issues that we've had, especially these last couple of years with the housing bills that have unfortunately passed in the California legislature. But we try to vote or show our support or opposition to bills like that. So if you're a member, you get emails where you're allowed to express your opinion that way. And you would also get a link to our newsletter online, as well as I know everybody gets a hard copy, but it's nice to have the full color version online. And then your fees go towards our newsletter printing, and we pay our delivery. Middle school students are out there 10 months out of the year delivering a newsletter, so we pay them. And then our big funding is for an annual scholarship and gifts to both Anza and Jefferson. And then we also fund whatever fees are required for things like candidate forums. So it's always an option to join online, or there are some membership forms over there tonight. All right, so a little more business to get through. We have to approve our minutes and financial reports, since this is a formal general meeting. So taped on the walls behind by the snacks are the minutes from last year's general meeting and the financial reports that reflect the activity since our last general meeting in June 2021. So I have to ask if there's any corrections to the minutes from last year's meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes? Anybody? I'm sorry. Who made the motion?
Glenda.
Oh, Glenda. Okay, thank you. And seconded? Anything? Okay, Lynn. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved and will be filed for audit. And next is our budget report that is posted back there. And this shows how our actual receipts and disbursements, compare to our budgeted amounts since the beginning of our fiscal year, which was September 1st of 2021, or 2022, sorry. So the budget surplus, looks like we will again have one. So we were able to give $2,000 each to Anza and Jefferson, and it looks like we'll be able to do that again for this coming year. And last year, Jefferson used their gift to update their library, and Anza used their gift to purchase some Chromebooks. Okay, so as far as the budget to actuals report, are there any corrections or comments? If not, then we'll just file that for audit. And lastly is the treasurer's reports that are shown in the back. There's two reports. One shows the activity starting from our last meeting up to June 3rd. Our meeting from June 3rd up until the end of our last fiscal year. So that one, the balance on hand on May 1st, 2021, $13,071.35 cents. Total receipts, $164.08. Disbursements, $6,175.13 cents. The balance on hand as at the beginning of the last fiscal year was $7,060.30 cents. All right, any corrections to those numbers or comments? All right, hearing none, the treasurer's report will be filed for audit. And the next treasurer's report shows our activity from the start of this fiscal year. And so the balance on hand September 1st, 2021 was $7,060.30 cents. Receipts, $14,053.05 cents. Disbursements, $8,342.49 cents. Balance on hand as of April 30th of this year, $12,770.86 cents. Any corrections or comments? Hearing none, the treasurer's report will be filed for audit. And then finally, our last thing is to ratify the checks that we've written since our last general meeting last June. So may I have a motion to ratify checks 1396 to 1469?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Roberta. Any second? Okay, Jane. All in favor of ratifying the checks? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion approved. Thank you for sitting through all that business. It's not very exciting. Here comes the more fun stuff. We're going to award our scholarship. Just wanted to give you a little background. Each year, Southwood selects a West High senior who resides in Southwood and attended both Anza Elementary and Jefferson Middle School. So for this year, Emma Schwing was chosen to be our 2022 scholarship recipient. So I'd like to call her up here, please. All right, congratulations, and we have some prizes for you. Flowers and balloons. Certificate, and the more important, the check. It's all in there. So I just wanted to ask Emma, so I know you're very involved in the drum line. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, so I didn't know if you could help describe that for people who don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's like essentially the marching drums from the back of your marching band performance, and then there's all the front ensemble instruments, which are like the xylophones and those kinds of things. And so we perform with like the marching band in the fall, and then in the winter we separate to just like the drums from the back and then like the xylophones and stuff from the front. And we've been competing like in our own form of competition in like the winter season. And this year we actually placed second in the state. So yeah.
It's a lot of fun to watch them. My son was in the band and they're just incredible. Not this year, but he was previously in the band. And so would you like to tell us where you're going to school and your major and why you chose the major in the school?
I'm going to the University of Oregon, and I'm majoring in neuroscience there. And I chose like the school and the major just because it has a really interesting like neuroscience program, and they have a lot of like undergrad research that is super interesting that they don't really offer in a lot of schools. So I think it just really fit my goals for the future. So yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, thanks, Emma, and congratulations again. Okay, so we can adjourn the meeting portion 7:12 tonight. And following our meeting now, we can, I'd like to introduce, I guess it's going to be Sergeant Ron Salary. He's going to speak first.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And he's going to talk about-
Is it okay if
Yeah.
I move this back just so that we're not blocking when we turn this on?
Yeah, you can move it back some.
Okay.
Yeah, they're having a little difficulty hearing. Of course, this works.
There we go.
Okay, so Sergeant Ron Salary is going to talk to us about crime trends in our area, give some prevention tips, and I'll let Ron take it away.
Nice. Yep. Yeah, I'm gonna turn it down as soon as I get started.
Okay.
Otherwise, I won't see what I'm doing.
That's true.
Cool. So I'm going to do this and have a presentation, a slide. Yeah, that is really dark, but you can see more.
I do.
I kind of want to look at people as I talk at the same time, but I know you're going to be focusing on the slide too. So again, I'm Sergeant Salary. I work in the Community Affairs Division at Torrance Police Department. And I've been there for, I don't know, it's been about 3 or 4 years now. 4 years that I've been in community affairs. When we were fully staffed, and I'll talk about that a little more, community affairs, we did a lot of different things. But it consists of community affairs side and the community lead officer detail, which deals a lot with homeless and just trending problems within the city that can't be resolved by your patrol officer who responds to just a single call. But we also, at Torrance Police Department, we like to focus on our relationship with the Torrance Police Department, improving it with the community we serve. And Community Affairs does that by partners in policing. We have some people who've gone through that here tonight. Teens in Policing is another program we have, neighborhood watch programs. We also have return home registry speaker requests. Our volunteer program, I have volunteer tonight. And this is the website where you can find a lot of those different programs. Right now, I mentioned staffing and budgeting limitations. When we were fully staffed in community affairs and our community lead officer detail, I had a staff of about 9. Now it is a staff of 1. So, and the individual I have is Detective Ed Lalonde. He's the only community lead officer I have right now available to me. It's a combination of our staffing issues. We're just short staffed and some budget limitations that has brought it down to that. So that's what we're working with right now. Torrance Police Department, we're celebrating our 100 years here. We've been around since 1921. We were incorporated, the police department was formed about 11 days after the city was formed. We have currently budgeted 221 sworn officers and supervisors. So that's combining all sworn, and 128 professional staff. We practice principal policing at Torrance Police Department. And that's just specifically procedural justice or implicit bias, where we focus on emphasizing respect, listening, neutrality, and trust, while we also address the common implicit biases that can be barriers for this. In that idea, we like to create transparency at Torrance Police Department, and one of the things we do, especially when I'm talking to individuals about the policies and procedures, how we do what we do and what are we governed by, I just like to let everyone know that all of our policies, our manuals, our procedures are online at our website. You can go and see what we're doing to train our officers, what rules they go by, and I really encourage everyone to do that, to check that out. When I talk about I'm going to talk about your crime trends in your area. What I do is I run a activity for the beginning of the year, so starting from January 1st, just for your boundaries, till last night, midnight. So I cut it off at midnight last night. And when I do that, we're looking at for what you cover, and that would be from Torrance from the north, South End, Sepulveda, Ocean Boulevard from the east, and then all the way to Redondo Beach to the west. And looking at that, to put it in perspective, the calls for service that we've had so far in the entire city is 20,691. And when I say calls for service, that means anything where someone calls Torrance Police Department and it generates one of our dispatchers entering information into our computers for a response. Now, for every time we have a response, there's probably 3 times that our dispatchers receive a call and they are able to resolve it without entering or requiring a response. So our communications is 3 times that amount. So if we're at 20,000 people or services, we're probably around 63,000 actual calls that come in since the beginning of the year. Out of that 20,691, 800 calls for service were within the boundaries I just mentioned. And so let's put that in perspective. That's for anything that generates a call for service. So illegal parking, there was 42. Kind of give you an idea. So that's about a little over 5% of your calls for service for illegal parking. Or false alarms. False alarm is where if you have an alarm system for your home or maybe for your business, and our officers are dispatched to that location, and it turns out it's a false alarm, nothing's wrong, everything checks out okay, well, that happened 40 times. So just between illegal parking and false alarms, you're looking at 10% of your calls for service for this area. But that's usually not what people want to know about. So residential burglaries, I get asked about that a lot. The number is usually not that high. Every residential burglary is bad, but that number is pretty low. I put it in there because I just get asked. But usually with that number, I don't even usually put it in there. But you have 4 residential burglaries, or 0.5% since the beginning of the year. What I do focus on are the reoccurring issues that happen in your area that tell me, hey, this is a crime trend, or there's a lot more of this particular thing happening than usual. I don't know if I said it, but 800 calls for service, and looking at your crime trends, they're very low, but there are some things that stand out. Grand thefts from vehicles. So this would also include catalytic converter theft, which that is not only a trend in the state of California, we are not excluded from it in the city of Torrance, and you've had 26 catalytic converter thefts in the area, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on. Another number that stood out was traffic collisions. Something happened after COVID where traffic collisions just went crazy. Everyone, I don't know if they forgot how to drive or something, and not just traffic collisions with vehicles, involving bicyclists and peds increased. And this area is no different. You had 4 collisions involving bicyclists and peds in that 42. And that's a high number. That number is homeless and mental health. related calls for service. In your area, you had 165. And that's like a floating number to try to track, because there are calls that come out related to homeless and mental health that don't initially come out that way. You know, we do have a mental health call for service, but it could just be a citizen who needs assistance, and it turns out it's a mental health situation or a homeless situation. But so we kind of have to search for some of them, but it's a hard number to hit. And I say that to say that it's probably higher than that, than the 165. But that represents 20% of your calls for service. The last high number that I wanted to bring your attention to is officers' self-initiated activity. And what that is we are very blessed here in the city of Torrance with our law enforcement that our citizens support us to go out there and be active. Try to get involved in things before they actually happen. And we call that officer self-initiated activity. It's a call where they weren't dispatched to. They're just out driving around and they see something that rises to reasonable suspicion that gives them probable cause to legally detain someone and investigate potential criminal activity. And in this area, you had 154 officer self-initiated activity. So if you look at officer self-initiated activity and homeless and mental health related issues, that's 40% of all the calls for service in this area. There were no other numbers that stood out really high other than those two, and then the couple of trends with the catalytic converter theft. But the homeless and mental health, how did we get to that? So you can't talk about homeless and mental health without talking about a Supreme Court case called Boise versus Martin. And what that discussed was in 2018, there was a Supreme Court case that went to the Ninth Circuit, U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. It didn't go to the Supreme Court, but the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. And what happened was Martin, a homeless individual, was cited in Boise, Idaho, for sleeping on a sidewalk. They had a municipal code in Boise and said you just can't do that. So they cited him. Anyway, it was fought all the way up to the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, and they decided that it is a violation of the Eighth Amendment to cite anyone who is experiencing homelessness in the United States for sleeping on a sidewalk. And the reason why they said it was cruel and unusual punishment is the courts deducted that if they have no other place to go, then it's cruel to cite them for the spot that they're in. So after that, it was petitioned again by LA County or the city of Los Angeles and some other cities to rehear this case. The 2018 case, what they ended up doing after the Ninth Circuit ruled that is they made a judgment to have that case thrown out. What they did is they settled out of court with Martin, and they had the decision vacated, and it allowed everyone to pretend like that ruling never happened. And then it went up to the United States Supreme Court to have them hear it, and they refused to hear it, which made it the law of the land. So to this very day, no law enforcement can cite someone for being homeless or occupying space in a public area on a sidewalk. Now, there's different things that are within play where you can do something about it, but for the most part, like if they're blocking the sidewalk completely, but for the most part, you can't. And this kind of transitioned into other areas. And the other area that it transitioned to is that now you cannot cite someone for being homeless and sleeping in their car while legally parked anywhere in the United States of America. There is only one condition in which the courts have interpreted that this can be done, where you can go ahead and cite someone. And that's if, and the Ninth Circuit talked about that, that's if the municipality, the county, the city in which the individual is being cited, if there exists enough homeless beds, places for your homeless population to go whether they're being occupied or not. So if your city has a place for your entire homeless population to go and sleep legally, then you can cite, or at least that's the belief up to this point. What the courts are really trying to do, though, is they're trying to let us all know that are involved in the criminal justice system is that we can't solve our homeless problem by criminalizing it. That's not going to solve it alone. So what we have been doing here in the city of Torrance is we use resources first. We don't respond with enforcement. The courts have been very clear with that. We use resources first. One of the resources we use a lot is lahop.org. I'll get back to that, but Harbor Faith Interservices, there's several others. But what you can do to help us and to help your community when it comes to addressing homelessness and resources is lahop.org. And what lahop.org is, I don't know if you remember, but in 2017, there was a tax measure. It's a quarter-cent sales tax that was passed in LA County. And that quarter-cent tax, it was called Measure H. And it passed, and it was specifically for all the funds for Measure H to go to reduce the homeless population in LA County, includes the city of Torrance. And so LA HOP receives a significant amount of money for Measure H. Measure H is a 10-year bill, so it's supposed to last for 10 years, and they estimated in the beginning that Measure H would raise $300 million in 10 years to help reduce the homeless population in LA County. But with, I don't know if it's inflation or I don't know, just all the state had a surplus of money. Well, that also worked for Measure H. So Measure H went from $300 million to now $1 trillion that it's going to raise in 10 years. The money there for the resources are there to help. But the problem is connecting people who are experiencing homelessness with the resources. And this is what we're asking you to do. Go to lahop.org. If you type that in, lahop.org, you'll get the website. This is the first page that you're looking at. When you see someone experiencing homelessness, go to lahop.org and fill out a request. At lahop.org, they have all the resources, mental health, housing, veteran, drug abuse, all the different counselings and resources are there. It's very well funded. It's just not being utilized. And what we're asking you to do is fill out a request every time you see someone experiencing homelessness. The homeless population is transient. So you might see someone at a location at one time, and fill out a request, and maybe when they send out someone, there's no one there. So we're asking you to continue to fill out a request every time you see that individual. And what's good about it is when you go to fill out a request, you will come to this page where you fill out your information. They ask for your email address, and definitely give them your email address. You don't have to give them your phone number, but give them the email, because what they'll do is if they make contact with that individual who's experiencing homelessness, every situation is private and confidential, but they will tell you that they made contact and that that individual has accepted help or refused help. And that really helps us out when we're trying to resolve the situation. There is one situation in which you would not use lahop.org, actually two. And the two is if it is an emergency, don't use lahop.org. We want you to call 911. And the question comes up, well, when do you know it's an emergency? And we just want you to default. If you're not sure, default to 911 and let us figure it out. We'd rather err on the side of making sure people get assistance when they need it in an emergency than not. The other situation where you wouldn't use lahop.org is if you see any children who are experiencing homelessness, then that is a 911 call. You would immediately get law enforcement involved. We have resources available to us where we can address that immediately, and you wouldn't use lahop.org. But for all other situations, we're asking you to fill out a request for lahop.org. Catalytic converter thefts, I talked about that. They are on a rise. A catalytic converter, it's an exhaust emission control device. And so every car with a combustible engine has one. And if you have a commercial vehicle or a large truck, you may have more than one. You can have up to 3 of them inside of there. And what it is it controls the emission systems. Crooks are taking them because inside of them they have precious metals like platinum and palladium. And so they are taking them originally for those precious metals. And now they're taking so many of them, I think it's just generating a second market. This is what a catalytic converter looks like. It's not the exhaust, but it is connected to the exhaust. Where we're pointing out on this vehicle is towards the middle of the car, is where your catalytic converter is at. And what criminals do is they use a cutting device, usually a sawzall or something like that, to cut the catalytic converter off and remove it from the vehicle. That sawzall or that portable cutting device, it makes a distinctive sound. It's very loud. And I'm going to give you an example of that. This is video of a catalytic converter theft that happened here in Torrance. Give you an idea of what it looks like and how long it actually takes. That white car is the suspect's car. Usually you have two people involved. One gets out as a lookout and the other one actually commits the theft. I don't have the sound on here, I just realized that, but you would be hearing the telltale sound of metal grinding on metal right now because they're cutting the catalytic converter off that SUV. And you'll see now that the white shirt gets back in the car, they're done. That's how long it takes. For some reason, when they're finished with the catalytic converter theft, they make a, I think this is the video where they do it. Let's see. That both of them get out of the passenger car, but you'll see that they make a U-turn when they drive away. I don't know why they did it. They made a U-turn. Normally, you just proceed forward to get out of the way. But if you looked at the time on this, it's 32 seconds. That's how long it takes them to do a catalytic converter theft. It's very quick. The quickness of being able to do is not the only reason why it happened. Why do we have an increase in catalytic converter thefts? Is kind of a perfect storm. Proposition 47 in California was passed in 2014, right? But Proposition 47, what it did was it lowered our felony property arrest amount to $950 or less. It was reduced from a potential felony to a misdemeanor. Your catalytic converter, if you unfortunately are the victim of a catalytic converter theft, it's going to cost you more than $950. It costs up to $2,000. Usually the average is about $1,200. But what the courts look at for conviction is the actual cost of the catalytic converter. They don't include what you pay your mechanic to replace it or any other associated fees. So that number gets down. So most catalytic converter thefts are misdemeanors. But that happened in 2014, and this rise started around 2018, 19. And what happened in 2019 was we had a no-bail system that was implemented in LA County. Originally, the no-bail system was implemented with the rise of COVID. It started before then, but it was really took effect in the rise of COVID. The thinking was, hey, let's get prisoners crooks out of jail, and COVID will spread less, so what we'll stop doing is holding criminals in jail for misdemeanors. We'll just let them go. And how that results in the streets is, like the individual who just committed that catalytic converter theft, we'll stop them, they'll have the catalytic converter, there's even video of the theft, but if there's not extenuating circumstances or priors or something to have enhancements which are not recognized, but we'll try it anyway, we have to give them a ticket, like in that situation, and let them go. The promise will appear in court. If they show up in court for their first offense, the maximum fine that they're looking at, even for multiple catalytic converter thefts, is $500. But your one catalytic converter is getting your criminal about $1,000 on the black market. So how to protect yourself from catalytic converter thefts? Park in well-lit areas, not just in front of your house, but a lot of these thefts are not happening at your house. It happens when you go to the grocery store, to the shopping center, other locations in or outside of the city of Torrance. You park in a high traffic area. If you can, there's a cage that you can weld on your catalytic converter on the car frame. If you have a garage, park your car in the garage, shut the garage door. Consider engraving your vehicle's catalytic converter with your license plate number. The problem that we're having is that when we do find these catalytic converters, in order for us to get a conviction, we have to have a victim. It's not enough just to have an obviously cut off catalytic converter where you know it's been stolen and the criminal in possession of it. To have a conviction, we have to identify who that catalytic converter belongs to. And catalytic converters don't have any identifying marks on them. So what we want you to do is to engrave your license plate number on your catalytic converter. You can do it yourself. We do it too. So the City of Torrance sponsors free engraving. We have one scheduled coming up June 21st, right here in the Sears parking lot at 10 o'clock, where we'll engrave your catalytic converter for you. You can look at our website online to register for the engraving. We ask you to register just so that we can not have it too backed up, but we're not going to turn away any Torrance resident that shows up to get their catalytic converter engraved. And if you see something, say something, which is how we got that video. Someone did see something and say something. This is just a press release that kind of illustrates what I'm talking about, having it engraved. This is where 20 suspects in Los Angeles were arrested, and they had 87 catalytic converters. That was good, but for us to get a conviction, we had to figure out who they belonged to. So we weren't able to get a conviction on all 87. Telemarketing fraud has increased recently. A lot of robocalls. I don't know if you're experiencing it. There's some scams that are out there. Just want to encourage you to register. You protect yourself. Number one, if it's too good to be true, just don't answer it. My dad, I tell him, just don't answer the phone at all. Just let your machine get it. But register on the do not call list. In the beginning, the do not call list wasn't that great, but now the Federal Trade Commission is doing a pretty good job of reducing that. You can register online. There's a number that here you can register, but it takes about 31 days. Keep in mind, though, the do not call list does not stop bill collectors from calling. So just one thing to get to know. And it doesn't stop any type of political, anyone who's calling you regarding political questions or surveys, it doesn't stop that. But it does really reduce your amount of calls that you're having. There's some contact numbers here that I like to give out. On the table here, I have a whole list of common contact numbers. It's just good to have for the city. Encourage you to use them. There is something called the Racial Identity Profiling Act, and that was passed in 2021. And the racial identity, I call it RIPA. It's easier for me to just say RIPA. But what RIPA does is it tracks everything that law enforcement does in the state of California. Who we stop, what we stop them for, who's being arrested, the crimes. And what they noticed in 2021 was that there was a 107% increase in anti-Asian hate crimes or hate acts. Ran the stats for the city of Torrance, and there were, in that same year, 3 hate crimes / hate acts.
In total.
In total for the same year. I don't think that it was 3 because somehow we managed to do better than the rest of the state of California. What I think is going on is that these crimes are underreported. And why it's underreported, I don't know. It could be cultural. It could be just knowing what's a crime, what's an act, what's available to you as far as what you can do to protect yourself. Informing people is the first step, which is what this is about. I have some hate crime brochures that if you please take one when you leave, just describing what a hate act is, what a hate crime is, and just how to protect yourself and what do you do when something like that happens to you, unfortunately, or you see it happen to someone else. Because it doesn't have to happen to you for you to help someone else who might be experiencing it. But that number is definitely underreported. And then there's Opiate awareness, there's a fentanyl epidemic that's going on right now, and fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. And unfortunately, what we're seeing that's happening is that fentanyl, which is very, very powerful, like 2 grains of fentanyl is enough to, like 2 grains the size of salt or sand is enough to cause you to overdose. It can kill you. And what's happening is we are experiencing in LA County and throughout the nation, individuals, especially young people, who don't have any prior drug history, overdosing. And some of this is being tracked to the fact that fentanyl is being disguised as Xanax pills and Adderall, Oxycontin, or nasal spray. So what happens is some young person or someone is lending what might be a Xanax pill or nasal spray to another college kid or another high school kid that's happening in high school, and they're overdosing on a drug overdose, and none of it makes sense, and what we're tracking it back to is fentanyl. And so also on the table, there are some opioid awareness brochures. Please take one. This is affecting everybody. There's no one that's not, all communities are being affected by it. Just the knowledge is a lot to reduce that, hey, there are pills out there and things out there that you think are completely safe that are being manipulated by drug dealers. And you gotta be aware of that. The last thing that we touched on was the traffic-related issues. And I said, I don't know what's going on with COVID, but the number one, the top 3 causation factors for the traffic accidents that we're seeing are speed, distracted drivers, and inexperienced drivers. This is a press release, and I mentioned earlier about the officer's self-initiated activity, and this is a traffic stop that resulted in self-initiated activity. This is an individual who in Nevada needed a ride to California, so he identified a lone female in Nevada, murdered her, and took her car, and was driving through the streets of Torrance when officers who were out there just doing self-initiated activity saw this vehicle, had reasonable suspicion to conduct a traffic stop related to criminal activity, and eventually after a foot pursuit, were able, in a vehicle pursuit, take a murderer into custody. Our ability to do that is the support from our residents in our city. They have us go out there and be proactive. And I mentioned about pedestrian safety tips. One I like to point out, all these tips come from, it's, how do you say, something bad happens and then you learn, don't do that. So that's where these tips come from. One of them is, if you do go out walking, definitely make sure you walk where you can see traffic, where bright colors. Don't drink alcohol and go out walking in traffic. And we still conduct high visibility enforcement. These are some traffic contacts that are actually on that form too. Just want to let you know it's good to have code enforcement. It's gone off and on with COVID. Connect with our social medias. I have a card where if you're not connected to Torrance Alerts, please sign up for Torrance Alerts. It's good to have. Follow us on Facebook. And I want to thank all of you for your support. That concludes that part.
We're going to do a quick switch out. Is it okay if the light's down like this? You can see me fine, right? Is that all right? I mean, I don't mind having them up, but I'll go over a couple of slides. So I'm going to turn on the lights. What I'd like to do is take a few moments to talk with you about the communication that I've had as a chief internally in the organization, so that you get the best value out of your police department for your city and your community. And so as a chief, the messaging that I'm sending out through the chain of command to the officers, the sergeants, the lieutenants, the captains, I think it's really important for you to know what's the framework that we're using to measure success in the organization, giving all of these current challenges that Sergeant Salary talked about. So I'd like to cover that pretty swiftly and then really open it up to answer your questions and to hear from you on topics or concerns that you have that are most important where we're going. A quick background on me, I was born and raised in this town, right down the street, Little Company Mary. Graduated from Torrance High School. When I was there, a motor officer came and talked about the Torrance Police Department. It's like, hey, this is what the job's about. If you want to get there, you got to make good life choices, which is, great advice in general. And I was like, I think I really want to do that. And so I went off and joined the Marine Corps. After that, when I got out, I was hired first by the Pasadena Police Department. I had a friend that was there. They hired me pretty quick. I had a really great time with that city. It's a very, if you know anything about it, it's a really great city. And then after about 3 years, I was like, I really want to lateral to Torrance. I want to continue to do this job, but I'd really love to do it in the town that I grew up in the town where I still live. So I came to Torrance in 2001, raised my kids here. They all went to Torrance schools. They're now off to college, which is great for them. And here I am today. One of the things that I talked about from the very beginning as the new chief coming in is this transition from, we talked a lot about excellence through teamwork, to this idea of our job together. When it comes to public safety, the police department can't do it alone. The residents can't do it only by themselves. The district attorney can't do it. It's how do we do it together? What is our job together? And really kind of pushing the organization, challenging them more towards this teamwork approach a little bit more broadly, a framework that we can use a little bit more. Do you have the clicker, Ron? Is this it?
Yeah, this is, I don't think I have to do a PowerPoint. This is a PowerPoint.
No, but it should still slide. Here we go.
Oh,
And so this is really to try to keep it very succinct for the organization of the 3 bullet points that I really want us to focus on as we start to move into what's called 21st century policing. A few years ago out of Washington, a bunch of people came together, a lot of law enforcement chiefs, sheriffs, people with prior experience came together and really came up with this idea called 21st century policing. And there's specific pillars that are in place that we should aim for when it comes to trust and accountability, which is what I expect from the organization and what you should expect too. We also talk about in there officer wellness, which is an important component. We need healthy people mentally to be able to serve at a really valuable capacity. And so I'll kind of go through these fairly quickly. This learning culture is an idea of how do we balance learning and accountability? How do we create an organization where when officers come back from a high-risk incident, that we talk about near misses, that a brand new officer in the front of the room stands up and goes, hey, I think I made a mistake or could have done better. So everybody learns so we don't repeat that again. And at the same time, though, how do we hold the organization accountable? If we have an officer that got off of policy when they should have known a little bit better, how do we balance that learning with accountability? We can't have an organization where we just say, hey, everything's learning and it doesn't matter. There's no accountability here. A sergeant told an officer to stop a pursuit and he didn't stop it. But that's okay. This is going to be a learning issue. We're going to introduce more accountability into that. And it is a balance, but that's a lot of the stuff that I've been focused on quite often with my management group, especially with decision-making in the organization, when actions in the field could be a learning opportunity and an opportunity for accountability inside the organization. So that's been a really big point. Secondly, intelligence-led policing. The expectation that I have for the organization is when managers and sergeants are making decisions in the field of what they're going to do, I want to know, what are you basing that information on? What kind of groups are we working with right now to get real-time intelligence that we can use to then drive policy decisions that we can use to drive the type of decisions we're making on where we're putting resources. And then lastly is evidence-based decision-making. I feel for the community, one of the things that I appreciate as a chief is a constant amount of feedback that we get. Just showing up here today really does mean a lot. It shows that you're engaged in your community and you have a lot of good questions. And my expectations for the organization is that we have good answers. And that's why evidence-based policing is really so important. We're not going to do things just because we think it might work. We want to do best practices that have some validity to them and been tested. And there may be some times where we're going to prototype stuff and we're going to collect the evidence. And then we're going to go back and look at it. But really what it is building upon our legacy in the past of this idea of focus-based policing, being involved in the community on problem locations. But the thing is, there's so much research out there now for public safety. The expectation for me to the management, the supervisor, the officers, when you come up with your plans, your ideas of things you want to do, I'm going to ask you what your evidence is and what are we basing it off of, so we can be good stewards of the public's trust. And so far, it's been really exciting to be able to dig into these 3 points. This is off a little bit. We talk about measuring success. Obviously, as the chief, one of the things I talk a lot about is the budget. The budget is not just a practical document on how we pay for resources and our officers, but it's also a political document. By political document, what I mean is, as a chief, I'm making decisions on how we're going to use resources to affect quality of life issues. And I'm accountable to the city manager and the council on how we're using those funds to really seek, maintain the quality of life in the city of Torrance, preserve public safety, and really reduce the fear of crime also, not just crime itself. This is, I don't want to get too geeked out, but there's a UCR, is Uniform Crime Reporting Index. It's the way we collect data and report what crime is. And that's what Sergeant Salary was talking about. We are making a switch, it's mandated, to a more detailed crime reporting system. We'll be able to dial it down to more specific crimes, to more specific areas, to really give you HD kind of view of your area, of what the problems really are, and then how we can address it. So that's actually a really big lift from our records professional management team that are trying to collect that data in a better way. Strategic plan, in the next few months, we'll be starting out with a new strategic plan for the police department. It's going to be based on 21st century policing. We will be reaching out to the community for input to be involved in that strategic plan process. Of course, intelligence-led policing and evidence-based decision-making is what I'm talking with the teams about weekly. One of the expectations I have with everybody in the organization is these three things every day. What have you done to lead leaders, train trainers, and build teams? You know, every officer there is a leader. What are you as a sergeant doing to help lead them, to make them more effective, and to make them more responsive to the community's needs? What are you doing to take our people who give our training to critical skills to make them better? Teach them how to teach, keeping them current, and then how do you measure success, how that's all connected, and then, of course, back to building teams for our job together to be more efficient for the community with what we do. One of the things that I did very quickly in the beginning is, accountability review from the organization, the top all the way down, especially looking through a learning culture and also evidence-based policing. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what's the evidence behind it? We've made some adjustments. When it comes to reporting districts, I think everybody knows now we have voting districts in the city of Torrance. The police department deploys our officers on police beats, and our beats that an officer is in is different than a voting district. We're trying to work on the technology right now so we can start cataloging crimes by voting district. So when we come to something like this, we can just let you know, hey, in your district right now, here's where the crime rate's at, and we can be a little bit more responsive, and also more responsive to council when they want to know what's going on in their district. Right now, it's kind of clunky for us to try to get the stats and data, but we're doing a decent job, but we are working on the coding. The discipline matrix is something that we're still working on. This idea when it comes to police discipline and accountability, there is an idea where sometimes you can have a very forward-facing document that, hey, if officers do this type of behavior, this is the kind of corrective action we're going to take. We're still doing some research back to evidence-based policing. Is that really the most effective way to have accountability? Instant reporting is something that we're really close to. And what that means is we're going to be rolling out a program where, let's say you wake up in the morning, you go out to your car and somebody rear-ended it, and you have no information at all. We don't have a license plate. There's no video. There's no evidence. There's very little the police can do. It's going to be more of a report for insurance that you'd be able to go on your phone and within 5 minutes have a report number that you could just email or text your insurance company, and they get the report and you could just move on and let the insurance company do their work. So we are working on rolling out that program for instant reporting. So for those kind of cases, it just makes it easier for you to get what you need done, and makes it more efficient for our police officers. Like Sergeant Salary told you, he talked about the discretionary time that police officers have. As the chief, I'm not, I guess the word is pleased so much with the time that officers have available for discretionary time, meaning right now on average, when an officer goes out in the field, about 85 to 90% of their time is just answering calls for service. And that has to do a lot with our population growth, our daytime population, and the limited number of officers we have in the field. So I would like to see instant reporting free up a little bit of their time so they can be out in your neighborhoods a little bit more, have more time to handle those quality of life issues. But we should be working on that pretty quickly. Our drone is a DFR. That stands as drone as a first responder. We are one of the first after the legislation got changed to have a drone program in the nation. We're still very involved in Washington, D.C. in guiding, directing national policy when it comes to use of drones. And we do have a program where when there's calls for service at night, let's say somebody calls and they think they hear somebody in their backyard, we have pilots that will send a drone over that area very quickly using infrared to look for people. So it's been a really good program, and we're trying to expand that and grow it. We're expanding our juvenile diversion program to offer better services for our community and for the school district to really help our youth that need some kind of intervention strategies that are a little bit more robust than we have right now. And then, of course, lastly is our VIP program, which stands for Volunteers in Policing. Our staffing right now is very difficult, so it's been hard to ramp up the volunteer policing program because it takes a little bit of time to do the backgrounds and then connect them to the training. But we are slow rolling that out as a prototype. For example, we have a woman that works for us now as a volunteer. She's a former attorney at Honda. She retired. She goes, I still want to stay busy and I like doing investigations. We did a background on her, and now she works alongside detectives and helps us with forgery cases. And so we have some really unique opportunities to leverage talent in the city to come in and really help the police department in a really meaningful way. And she's been doing a great job, and she loves coming in and being part of our investigations. So we're looking at more programs that we could do like that to bring back to help the community and to make the police program more effective. And this is some of the other programs that we kind of resurrected and brought back that we've been pretty big on. SMART stands for Strategic Mutual Aid Response to Terrorism. We've really been taking the lead in the South Bay on what happens when a critical event, something like you saw in Texas, in the South Bay. And how do we handle that in a way so the city of Torrance is still protected with our resources and we don't lose them all to a different city and we still have enough resources behind. So that's one of the things we've been rolling out. I sit on the executive board for the Joint Terrorism Task Force with the FBI. I was out there today where we got debriefed on some of the most critical incidents that you've been hearing about lately. And I'll take that information back to South Bay and we'll make some policy adjustments and training adjustments to make sure that our officers are ready. One of the things that we did when the incident happened in Texas most recently is obviously reaching out to the school district to let them know, hey, we are here for you. We will be driving by all the schools and be more present. It is very strange that usually when something happens like that, you do see copycat events across the nation, which we've seen in the news. You've probably seen some things that have been stopped and averted in between that. So the other thing we did too is we made sure that some of our SWAT officers had vehicles. So if something does happen, they can go directly to that site, lead the younger officers to really get quality services on site if something were to happen. We have our SAFE program, and this is our high visibility enforcement for traffic collisions. One of the things, if you're somebody that likes to get down to the weeds and you want to learn where we're going to go when it comes to traffic safety, it's called Vision Zero. Vision Zero is this idea of how do we not only use police to do traffic calming and be around more, but how else can we design cities and roadways and sidewalks to reduce vehicle deaths? In the last 5 years, I just had the stats run from the organization because there needs to be a shift in the way that public safety and law enforcement looks at traffic collisions in general. So over the last 5 years total, 45 people have been killed on city streets in Torrance alone, 45. And that's a tremendous number. It's huge. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's LA County, California, just the nation, people are like, yeah, well, welcome to LA. If it's like the Wild West when you're trying to drive out there. But we have to do a better job, public safety wise, the way we communicate traffic safety and the way we design our communities to make it safer. That's going to be a pretty big lift that we'll be focusing on pretty strongly over the next year. That's a general kind of broad overview of a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about. Wow, that's bright with the organization, but I would like to open up for questions. I don't know if you want to do guided questions or if you just want me to take it, I'm fine.
Okay, just take them.
We're just good? Okay. Where should we start? Yeah, sure. Thank you.
So I'm walking somewhere on the sidewalk. I happen to see somebody with a crack pipe smoking crack. What am I supposed to do? I mean, obviously I'm not engaging them.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to call the police? I don't think it's a 911, but it's not something at least I want to see in the neighborhood.
Yeah. We, like Sergeant Salary said, you could jump in too where you want. We always, as police officers, for us, calling 911 is not that big of a deal.
Question. So
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Yeah. The question was, if you were walking down the street and somebody smoking a crack pipe, what should you do? What should you do? I was going to say is a lot of times for law enforcement, we're like, hey, call 911. But for a lot of people, like they're like, it's like the Holy Grail. You don't touch 911, especially on phones back in the day. But I would encourage you to call the police. And there's a whole host of reasons why. It could be if that person really is smoking crack and they are high, they jump into the street, they get hit by a car. We do know that people who have substance use problems usually don't hold down jobs and try to find other ways to get money. And it could be that they're going to break into a car or something in the house. So we would always ask you to call the police department if you saw anything like that. Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
So I watch the council meetings, and I've seen that there's been updates about money coming from the county for the housing.
Yeah.
For, I don't even know what it's called. Little housing, I don't know.
Yeah, the tiny homes.
The tiny homes.
Yeah, 3290, some people call it, that's the
Yeah.
address, sure.
So what's the timetable? Is that almost ready, or is it done?
So the question is, there are one of the things the city of Torrance is doing is building tiny homes so that we can enforce the anti-camping ordinance. So if you're unhoused in Torrance and we have an open bed, and if you don't want it, the police are going to enforce anti-camping. I mean, these are resources here for you. And if you're, well, I don't want the resources, okay, then in our community, we're going to enforce anti-camping. It is on track. Last I heard, because there are a lot of things that they're trying to finalize, probably for the first week of July. I think after 4th of July, to be able to open that up. We have meetings on it, a couple meetings every week, but it is on track to do that. And the city just did receive some more funding to fund that project of those tiny homes.
How many are there?
40? 40.
Yeah.
40?
40.
Would there be an opportunity for people just to take it to?
Last I heard, I think it will be open for the media to kind of tour and maybe some, I know some assembly members want to see it, but I don't think they're going to do an open house for the public to go through them. But you can go online and see what they look like. They're actually quite nice, and they look quite nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, this question is, it's right next to the police department. So it shares a wall with the police department. And if there's one universal truth, everybody wants a tiny home shelter away from them. There's, right, because even the police officers are like, this is our last place to feel safe. It is true. I mean, I feel what they're saying. You know, they're out in the field, and once they come into the compound, they can kind of relax a little bit, and then the houses sit kind of high, and they can look into the compound. But like I've talked with the organization, back to our job together, if there was one group of people that I would expect to take more of the weight of this than anybody else, it would be the police. You know, we expect a lot of them, and if anybody's going to do it, then why not us? And why not that we lead it first over anywhere else? And so we're going to. Yeah. I think there's a question in the back. Oh, yes, right here.
Do these tiny homes, do they have the meals provided for them, and the laundry facilities, and the, like they do in Florida or San Diego?
Yeah, so the question is, are there meals? And there's going to be meals, there'll be laundry, they have showers, they have restrooms. One of the things that I've done, we have one community lead officer that Sergeant Salary talked about, and that's because we've, you know, with our reduced staff, we've had to push everybody to patrol. But with that one, what I've had him do is go to every place where they've had a similar shelter to ask, hey, what did you do when you set it up? What have you learned? What would you do different? To take all those best practices back so we can try to implement those. And so, yes, they will have, you know, be fully contained. There'll be private security there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that are responsible for everything inside there. The unhoused people, looks like they'll enter into some type of contract agreement with the provider that keeps them to get the document service ready to put them into permanent housing. But they will have everything there internally, yes. Yes, sir, in the back.
Yeah, the city council just recently approved the 2022 budget that's predicated on Measure SST passing being settled. Should that measure not pass, the budget that was just passed calls for significant reductions in public safety, the fire department, police department, Can you kind of briefly explain to us if that measure does not pass?
Yeah.
What reductions we're going to see at police on house and effect operation?
Yeah. Did everybody hear that? That's a long, I mean, it's pretty detailed. I'll cover it very broadly to talk about. One of the challenges as the chief is winning the hearts and minds of the people that you lead in the organization. They have a job that is very difficult. The minute that they go to work and they go outside the compound, they're met with uncertainty. They do, tell their loved ones goodbye and hope to come back home to work. So we know they put themselves in harm's way. And so I try to inject more stability into their professional lives, not less. And it has been a challenge for me to keep them grounded and not in fear of losing their jobs when it comes to the idea of budget cuts. I was given a direction from my boss as city manager to come up with a plan of 5% budget reduction, what that would look like. The police department has the largest budget in the city, and therefore we have to cut a lot of money, $8.5 million. If you go back and look at council meetings, the messaging that you've heard from, me as a chief has been pretty consistent. Our most expensive, our largest expense in the police department is the salary for our officers. My discretionary budget is very small. The only way for me to reach that is to cut positions. There's not enough programs for me to cut to reach that. So where it looks like right now is going to be about 44 police officers positions that would have to be cut. Information flows in the organization directly and also, from the sides. And I've heard that recently some officers have been going up to personnel, getting their files to look to go to other agencies where they feel they have more career opportunities to be more safe and secure. And I heard today that some of the officers have been looking based on the seniority list of where they would be fired if the cut goes through. So I went to briefings today to tell them, look at that is a possibility, but we're a long ways away. And there's a lot of other things for us to look at when it comes to budget reductions before we get to the point where we know for sure that we would have to cut people. Where we're at right now, if it doesn't pass, is we're going to have some really hard conversations as a community and as a chief of what we need to do to meet whatever expectations are placed on me for the organization. Yes, sir.
If you can explain to everybody what that is.
Oh, if the SST measure doesn't pass, which is a tax measure for the city to kind of bring back the cost of public safety and some other benchmarks to get the city back on track. So I talked with the officers again today. I think they were very receptive of the message that I had to share with them. And like I said, this last council meeting, I didn't say it to scare anybody, but the thing is, in the past, what we've done is attrition. We can project out retirements. We go, okay, this year, these many officers are going to retire. We could just have salary savings there and not have to let anybody go. But for us to try to reach an $8.5 million budget cut on attrition, it would take us to 2033. And we wouldn't be able to carry that money that long. So it is a pretty big challenge. We have had officers lateral away from us just because of the fear and uncertainty. I meet with every officer that leaves. That's what they're telling me some of the reasons are. And they're in high demand. It's very competitive. And any agency loves to take Torrance police officers because they're well-educated, highly trained, respectful, and they're really good at their job. So that is, that does take up a lot of my time right now, communicating inside the organization when it comes to that type of budget. And that is, to the point that was brought up, I encourage you to go back and watch council meetings to see, because it's laid out pretty clearly on where that's at. Yes, sir.
Well, if the measure doesn't pass and reductions are paid, operationally, what services can we not see from the police department?
Yeah, that's a great question. It would, and this is what I said in council, and intellectually being very honest, it would fundamentally change the structure of the Torrance Police Department. We would essentially become an organization that responds to 911 priority 1 calls, and that's it. That would break my heart as a Torrance resident and as the chief. There's an expectation that the community has the community has here on the quality of service that you receive. And I think a lot of times we forget what kind of normal is everywhere else. For example, if you're driving the city of LA and somebody smashes into your car, nobody's coming. The police will not come. They won't take a report. If you have, one of the crimes that you talked about that's been decriminalized, they're not coming there either to take a report. They just have to keep their resources clear for emergency calls for service. We would lose most of our detective division. We would have no community affairs. We'd lose a traffic division. We'd lose a lot because those positions that you really just have to staff your patrol people and try to keep it there. So it would fundamentally change the organization, my commitment to the community, my commitment to the group here today. So if you call 911 because your life's in danger, I guarantee that we will have officers there to help you in that instant, but we will be solely focused on priority 1 calls for service. And that's just, from a strategic perspective on limited resources, and then how do you drive performance towards the most critical components that affect public safety. That's what we'd be doing. When you get petty thefts, we wouldn't respond. When somebody breaks into your car, call your insurance company. Those are worst case scenarios, but what the danger is, there are many cities that have already been like that. And Torrance is, trying to do everything we can to not become a city like that. Because there's a reason why we all moved to Torrance and stay in the community with expectations of the quality and level of service that we have. Yes, sir, in the back.
Of the SST, what percentage of that is either devoted to the police department only, or is it all?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's great. So a lot of that has to do with the math of how much they think SST would bring in on the tax measure. So fire and police department be fully restored. So the $8.5 million for a budget cut for the police department would be pushed back. So it'd be $8.5 million we can back to the PD. So we'd be fully staffed at 220. The fire department would be at $3 million to bring them back up to where they were.
And where does the rest of that?
The rest of it is from the last city council meeting is to pay down to get our reserve back where it needs to be, and then also try to bring down our self-insurance fund. The one component that I think is interesting, and I know it's the community is the one that talked about it, is a task force driven by the community for accountability on that measure of where it goes in public meetings. Yeah. But right now, to date, since the budget stuff has been going on, 16 of the positions that the police department should have been frozen, just to try to use that salary savings to keep the PD afloat. So right now, we have 16 positions that I wish we could fill. That's more than an entire shift, which we haven't. And so what that means for us internally is where we used to have 12 police officers on motorcycles do traffic enforcement, I have 5. I have 1 community lead officer where we used to have so much more. We have no undercover team. We used to have an undercover team called CIT, or Crime Impact Team. And I was speaking with some people the other day about the impact of having to remove those people from those specialty assignments. So an example is this: our Crime Impact Team are undercover detectives that follow really the worst of the worst. And there are some really bad people out there. They were working a case. I had to disband them to send them to patrol. And so they got off that case. They were following a man who lives in our city, who is a white supremacist of the Aryan Brotherhood, which is a prison gang. We had to pull off it. Those people were in patrol. 3 weeks later, he killed 2 people in Pomona. He has killed 2 more people on top of that. We found that out 2 weeks ago. I reached out to the FBI. I reached out to the Pomona chief. I reached out to LAPD, the sheriff department, and the feds. We had an internal meeting. We have since arrested him. I can't get into the other details, but there are serious consequences that I see as the chief already with what we've had to do just to maintain basic public safety services. And a lot of those things, we don't talk about a lot publicly, of kind of behind the scenes of what the police department is able to do to keep the community safer. But I'm glad we did give it a cut some this few weeks. Yes, ma'am. Hi.
I know the LA Times is also reporting about police officers that were racist or prejudicial or homophobic actions. And I know that they're opposed to that, trying to take actions against police officers. And I wonder what you're doing, that you're doing HR, or you're doing in training, how are you reaching out to fix that?
Did everybody hear in the front? There's an LA Times article that came out about racism and racist text messages of police officers inside the Torrance Police Department. I will always have radical candor and talk as much about I can, and the point where I can't talk about something, I'll let you know. But the very beginning was somebody came to the police department to complain and said, "Hey, I was arrested, and my car is impounded, and somebody destroyed it, and I want a crime report." And so a regular patrol officer says, "Okay, I'll take your report." Takes the report, gives it to detectives. Our detectives did what they were supposed to do. They investigated. And they think they know who it is, and they think they know who it is, but they're following the evidence. And then they see evidence that was 2 Torrance police officers on duty. So we had internal meetings. We continued the investigation. Those officers were let go. They were fired. And charges, we took our investigation to the district attorney, and we said, we want to file charges on these former officers for these crimes. The district attorney has accepted those charges, and that will be going to court soon. So I talked about accountability. So the one thing that I am proud about of it is at least the internal system worked, where the officers and detectives did the job they were supposed to do. When they saw misconduct, they didn't look the other way. They put together a solid case. The district attorneys accepted that case. As a result of that investigation, information came out given to me of messages that were racist, homophobic, misogynistic. And I've been very clear that I won't tolerate that. I don't think anybody in this community would tolerate that, and that I will seek accountability for it. There are several things that happen when you have allegations like that from people in positions of public trust. Is how do you regain legitimacy? How do you ensure to the community that the Torrance Police Department has a clean bill of health? And there's a couple ways that usually gets done. What usually happens is the Department of Justice, either federally or the state, we usually go to a judge, get an injunction against the city, and basically take over the police department. I took about 6 months fighting and fighting with the Attorney General, and I mean this in a respectful way, fighting intellectually, about, hey, the process that you have in place to come to a city and take it over with the judge and do an injunction, and then it usually costs the city about $8 to $10 million to pay for all the attorney fees and all the experts. And my argument to the state was, if you want more chiefs to come forward when they need help on misconduct, then we need to create a system that doesn't cause more harm to the community. $10 million charged to the city, to the Torrance residents, would mean these reductions. And that causes more harm, not less. The Attorney General's stance was, hey, I can go to a judge and get an injunction, and you have to listen. And I go, yeah, I get that. But you have a council, a chief that is willing to lean into this and do the right thing. And so we are working right now on a memorandum of understanding, an MOU. We'll be bringing that forward to council in 2 weeks. I am very pleased right now with what the MOU looks like. I can say that they have agreed that they will cover the costs of the attorneys and the experts. And like I said to the Attorney General, we have the opportunity right now in this process to lead the way for a new model of reform that's never been done and to set the standard in California. So I am very hopeful that even though we're dealing with very serious issues that I'm not pleased with and we're going to accept responsibility for, I am pleased that out of this, we're doing it the right way. We're going to go all the way back to truth and trust and accountability, and we're going to do so in a way that doesn't cause more harm to the community, especially when it comes to cost. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded, but I think it's really important to kind of get to the entire place of where we're at. And we will, when we start with the DOJ process, we will be having a lot of community meetings. We will have a lot of sessions too to hear what can we do better. And the accountability component of us being very publicly of all the policy changes and practices we're making, I think you'll be very pleased with the communication that we have set up to go through this process. And on average, it takes about 3 years of just, a bunch of improvements. Does anybody else have any other questions related to that I didn't answer? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Also, 220 officers, some of those paid leave, or
had a hard time. So you said of the 221 officers, are some of them on paid leave? Okay, yeah. So in the state of California, you have a police officer bill of rights, and there are processes that we have to follow when administrative investigations are happening. And one of those is if they're placed on administrative leave, they're usually placed on administrative leave with pay until that whole process is completed. And so there's an incentive for me to make sure that the investigation is thorough, but also swift, but not giving up the thoroughness of the investigation. So yes, when you look at our numbers right now, we should be at 221. We have 16 positions that are frozen. I have 16 officers on administrative leave. I have about 10 officers that are injured on duty. I have some that are retiring but running some vacation time. I'm right around 50 officers down. When you start looking at if I called 911 and told every cop to come here right now, I'd be 50 down. Maybe, yeah, right around 170-ish that would be able to show up. But yes, they are on administrative leave right now. And what that means also for the police departments, they're brought in, their police officer powers are removed. So yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes, they're on administrative leave.
What's the process of where we're seeing vans parking and people living in, whether it's in Sears parking lot or others, or where the bus deals and they're there for 3 or 4 days, with all their stuff? Is there a process or a policy in place in Torrance for that?
Yeah, so the question is, people live in their vehicles, what's basically what's going on with people living in vehicles?
Or just in the bus?
The buses, yeah, sure, yeah. Like Sergeant Salary said, some of the challenges that I see as a chief are challenges with legislation from the state that dictate what the police can and cannot do, and then also being in LA County. I get a lot of complaints in conjunction also with street vending. And you know what? If you're in LA County and street vending is a lot more Wild West than it is in Orange County. So that's one issue, and the state laws. When it comes to the vehicles, it's not a crime anymore for people to sleep in their cars. So there's nothing the police can do on that. We do have a law in the books that says you have to move your car every 3 days. So if we go out there and the car is in place, but even if it just moves half a foot, technically they're okay. And I know it's frustrating for you, and it's frustrating for the officers. One thing that I found out just last month is there are people that have really nice RVs,
Right.
that are renting them out now on Airbnb. Right? They're going to Redondo Beach, they're going to Torrance Beach. You want to live in the beach life? Airbnb, stay in there, and they're renting out. Now we are working on some really unique solutions for that, because that definitely goes against the spirit of the law of what they're doing. But we always ask that if you see somebody and it does look suspicious and they're sleeping in their cars, that you do call us. Because what it helps us do too, like we were talking about, is get them to resources and for us to get to know them a little bit more. But it is a huge problem. And it is pretty frustrating.
They can do that on private property where you see them in Sears and other business lots. You only enforce it if they're on the street.
Yeah. Do you know of any special law right now?
When it comes to private property, we do identify the property owners and educate them on what the result will be to them as a property owner allowing this to continue. And as a result, we get support. And so we don't start off trying to use enforcement in that situation. We offer resources. One location that comes to mind is the old Social Security building at Crenshaw.
Right.
And right over there near Southwood and Crenshaw. And that was one of those situations where it had been bought out by someone else. They're in a several-month process of ever doing anything, and cars were starting to appear. Criminal activity, drug activity was starting to appear. And in the effort to first offer resources, we identified those people who didn't need resources, but they were not taking care of the vehicles that they had there. We had the support of the owners. So we were able to remove and impound 8 cars that you still have to have your car registered. It's not legally parked there. And if you're not accepting resources, we're going to enforce the law. And we're able to do that. It's a process. but we still are working with property owners to enforce that process.
And we've had some people in cars get really upset because every day an officer goes back to ask if they want resources. And like, I already told you no, like, we're gonna tell you every day to offer you resources. And then sometimes they'll move their car somewhere else. That's not the best solution. Like, as a chief, I don't want to tell the next chief, hey, I'm just trying to move cars to Redondo. I'm just trying to, right? That is not the solution that we're going for. We are trying to have a more holistic approach at the South Bay. I get along really well with all the other chiefs, so we're trying to work together in this. But it is a really complex problem, and we are limited a lot just with a lot of this legislation that's out.
What about now the bus stops or some of the park areas, and sometimes they're there just 4 or 5 days. You see any sleeping, you know.
Yeah.
What's the policy on that? Just gotta wait for them to leave in a week or?
For people like camping in the park, sleeping in the park?
Yeah, just sleeping with their baskets and all their stuff, all this type
Yeah.
stuff. And I wonder about people that want to use the bus stop. That want to sit there like next to that, like
Right.
Carson Street, you know.
Yeah, the hope that we have is that once we get the shelter open, we will start to be able to enforce the anti-camping ordinance. I said in the very beginning the importance of constitutional policing to make sure that we police in a way that protects everybody's constitutional rights. And some of it is sometimes where it gets a little messy. So you can not, if it's after 10 o'clock in the city of Torrance at night, you're not allowed to be in the park until 6 or 5 in the morning. 6? I think it's 6. It's 6 in the morning. And so we could go to a park and say, hey, it's 11 o'clock at night, or let's say it's 3 in the morning, we're giving you a ticket. But then the concern I have is you go to Wilson Park at 3 in the morning and it is full of working professionals that get up early to work out and do laps. And so as chief, I'm going to get him, hey, you're giving tickets to people here that are sleepy, but you're not giving tickets to the ER doctor who's trying to get a workout in before he does his early surgery. So it's this balancing approach of us trying to make sure that we're policing in a way that's just not targeting one class, one group, one specific people. So we do a pretty good job right now with our CLO and our outside resources on contacting people who are sleeping in limited parks to get them out. And then once the shelter is open, we have a plan in place to start enforcing. It is really difficult. Really quick, I do hear from the community how frustrated they are that, hey, I went to have my kid's birthday party and I rented a space in a park that I paid for, and it is not a place that I would have rented for my kids to have a birthday party. And we're trying to do a better job to be more responsible with that too. Yes, sir.
When you talk about, you said that you have to, in order to enforce the anti-camping on the street, you have to have enough beds for all of our homeless. But how do you count the homeless in Torrance, the homeless in LA County?
So yeah, it kind of like, how do you make sure you have enough beds for all the homeless? What the law, the interpretation of law from our city attorney and a lot of city attorneys from it is that you have to have an open bed for that person. So it's not based on, hey, you have 350 homeless people in the city of Torrance, you need 350 beds. It's Torrance PD goes out there, there's a person who's homeless sleeping in the park. Hey, do we have an open bed? Yes, we do. Hey, we're going to give you help and services. Do you want it? Our community has said, we're going to give you help. And if you don't want it, then we're going to enforce it on the law. So it's per person by an open bed.
Because I was curious about, like, when we opened the small home village there, if other homeless in the surrounding cities or counties say, oh, look, Torrance is providing all this great stuff to the homeless, and then they come in and take more of our resources, and suddenly we have more homeless and not enough beds again.
Right. Yeah.
So how do we manage that?
Yeah. One of the things that we've done in talking with the county is to try to ensure that those beds are for the homeless people that are in the city of Torrance. So what that really means for us is if LA County is trying to connect somebody with a bed, they've committed that they're going to connect them into those beds that are available throughout LA County so we can use this one at Torrance for Torrance residents. I haven't heard from all the shelters that we've been going to that too many people have been flocking to the city to just get those beds. A lot of the people that we're dealing with know the shelter's coming. Quite frankly, they've told our officers, we don't plan on going there. They've said, we don't want to be next to the police department. Okay, you get a choice of what's gonna happen when it's there, but, it's a complex problem and it's hard, but the thing is, there are resources out there. We're trying to be part of the solution, where you're not seeing a lot of leadership anywhere else in LA County when it comes to how do we tackle this issue. And this is one way to start moving in the right direction. So the open bed is connected to the person at that time.
What do you do with, like, a lot of the homeless people, like somebody behind me mentioned that I've seen, there's a lady that was camped out for quite a few days on Hawthorne Boulevard in one of the bus covers. And clearly, it's a mental health issue. She sits there mumbling to herself, she's got her stuff around her, and she's rocking and talking to herself. And I mean, what do you do with somebody that is just clearly not able to make decisions to say, you come to say, hey, come to this village, they're just not there.
Yeah.
Mentally. Yeah, I know there's laws now that it's not illegal to be mentally ill, so you can't have them admitted or put them in a home or anything, so you just.
That's kind of like the complexity of the issue with, that's going on, not just in the state of California, but in the United States. And so you're absolutely right that there are individuals that I personally feel that they need support, mental support, and they should not be out on the street. Not just they shouldn't be on the street because I don't want them in the community, but they need support. The problem is having laws and representatives who share that same thought, because what the struggle that's going on in the United States and California is no difference, is balancing individual freedom with someone who actually no longer has the capacity to have that privilege of their individual freedom. So at what point does the individual freedom subside where you can say you must get help versus, well, no, the Constitution says no, we can't do that. And so that's the laws we have now, that's the problem. I can't say enough. If you feel that, hey, you know what, that needs to be looked at better because the system we have now is not working, then get involved in your community and elect individuals who represent the way you believe. Because right now, we have individuals that represent a more complex issue that doesn't seem to be working the way it is. But we have limited resources on this complex issue on the law enforcement side, and we're working with it. But the long-term solution is finding out where is that balance where you can force someone to get help because they need it. And that's not a law enforcement decision. Those laws are passed and we enforce them. That's where we're at right now.
What department or who, or are there service or a different department that takes care of people with mental illnesses that are on the street?
Yes, we have our Torrance mental health evaluation team, and in those kind of cases, if somebody meets the criteria, they're gravely disabled, unable to care for themselves, we do take care of them, custody of them, to a psychologist, to a hospital usually, to get evaluated medically and mentally. That's what we do a lot of times in those cases. We're the only city in the South Bay that through a grant has an LA County psychologist attached to our officers. And they can go out there and spend the time with these people to get them the care that they need. It does take, hours per day, each day for them to work on somebody. And they do a lot of that work for people just like that. We're looking at some other options of funding from the county to also connect with our fire department to be able to go out there and try to provide those services. But you bring up a really, really valid point. A couple of weeks ago, in open council, I took some heat and the council took the heat, even just moving forward with the shelter program that we have already. And what I kind of gave back to the community to think about is like, when Gavin Newsom comes out and says that you need to start taking enforcement to do something because people are unhoused, and that letting them be on the streets is not trauma informed or taking care of them, I think you're starting to see people finally go, okay, we need to offer some type of government intervention that actually has lasting impact and cares for the person at the same time. Because letting them stay on the streets like that is not good for them, and it's definitely not good for them.
Yeah, it's cruel.
Yeah. No, it really is, especially when it comes to the mental health side, because so much is connected to that. Yeah.
So that comes with that website that you saw that to
Right.
report homeless. I didn't know about that maybe when I was senior, I could,
Yeah.
not online reported.
Yeah, we're trying to get the word out as much as we can because it is a really, really great resource. And we're trying to, be better partners with the entire county on it. Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you for being here. What else? Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to personally thank you for your work.
Oh, thank
I
you.
mean, I don't know how you do it. I really don't know how you do it. I have lived in Torrance 58 years. And my question to you is I heard that Walmart lets people stay in their parking lot if they're in a camper or they're homeless. Is that true?
So Walmart, unless something's changed recently, I don't know about, when Walmart was first opening up, and Lowe's also, not Lowe's, I'm sorry, Sam's Club, which is a company of Walmart. Walmart has a policy kind of broadly nationwide that if you're traveling in your van or RV, you can sleep in their parking lot. What the council did at the time is working with them to make sure that that was not going to be the case in our city. So you can go on apps to, like, if you're traveling around the US and what Walmarts you can stay at. If you look at ours, it will show you that that's not a place you can camp at overnight. Same for Sam's Club. Now, we do see some people that are traveling through on a family vacation and stay there because they don't know. But the general rule of the city of Torrance, like some other cities, that is not a place where you can camp overnight.
And again, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have everything you need to respond to an active shooter at a grocery store and a school and a church? Do you have the resources so you can go in
Yeah.
and stop it?
Thank you. That's a good question. So the question is, does the police department have everything they need to respond to an active shooter? The police department has a really robust, very thorough active shooter rapid deployment training course that we put all of our officers through. We also have a lot of equipment to help us get into a location to keep it safe. There are some people in the state of California who think police departments shouldn't have that type of equipment. And so the legislator just came out and basically said, hey, chief, you can't have any of this. This equipment now is now considered military equipment. You can't have it. You can only have it if you do an inventory and then hold 2 public hearings and then do presentations and get full unanimous approval to be able to have this military equipment. So it makes it more difficult for us to have the tools that we need. Staff inside the PD has been working very hard over the last 6 months on working through all of that government paperwork and staff reports and showing it to council to see it, which council recently has. And now every year we will come back and show what that equipment is. One of the things that we have to do as part of that is also tell the public everything we have. So people now know, and you got to remember, there are people that want to subvert some of the tactics and strategies of the police department. So you'll be able to go to the website and you'll be able to see, oh, the Torrance Police Department has 2 canisters of tear gas, and that's all they have. So after they use 2, we know they don't have any more. As a chief, that doesn't make me happy. It's not very strategic, but we've done that. So we do have all the equipment. We have a rescue vehicle. We have tools and equipment to get through doors. We have a great relationship with our school district where we train them every year. Every year at the opening of the school district, before it opens, we send our SWAT team and they do a strategic walkthrough of the schools to make sure that everything looks safe, that they have doors that somebody can come in and easily change. We also give training to all those teachers. We do the same for all the hospitals in the city of Torrance. So we take it very, very serious. In LA County, we also have our SWAT team with all our SWAT teams trained every year with the Sheriff Department, LAPD. So if we need to use their helicopter to get more resources in more quickly, we can. The one piece of equipment we're looking at maybe getting sometime in the future is a MedCat. It's a rescue vehicle that's outfitted for our paramedics. So about 5 years ago, we started a program where we take our paramedics through a screening process from the fire department, and then we put them in training with our SWAT team so they have all their medical equipment. So if something happens, we bring the team and the paramedics into the location to give first aid inside because there's no time to get people out. We don't go very public with a lot of that stuff because we don't want a bad actor to kind of know everything we can do. But we do have everything we need. Thank you for asking that. And to your point too, that's why recently what we did is we gave vehicles to our SWAT officers. So when they're off duty, they can still respond in a timely manner with their equipment and lead our officers if something were to happen. So
But your officers wouldn't wait.
say again?
If the officers wouldn't wait for this one.
No, ma'am. Yeah, correct. I want to say 3 years ago, we had a shooting at the mall, and it came out as an active shooter. We had officers in there at the location where the person was down in about 40 seconds, which is way super fast. The average response time is 7 to 10 minutes. But our officers do a really good job of going in there and getting inside right away. Yeah, thank you. Anything else?
If there's one more question, or we should probably wrap it up soon.
Sure.
Are the sellers comparable, the city of Torrance, police is paid comparable to other cities around, or what is it?
Did the union ask you to? Did the union? I mean, I'll give you an honest answer always, The question basically was, what is the pay of the officers compared to other agencies? The latest information that I saw as far as pay for a police officer in LA County and comparable agencies, we look to a lot. So we'll look at Beverly Hills, Glendale, Pasadena, but of course locally in Manhattan Beach, Redondo, all that kind of stuff. Torrance police officers are down to number 8 for pay.
Out of?
Out of 10, survey that just done out of 10, they're number 8. So they're lower than Redondo, lower than Manhattan, lower than a lot of Santa Monica, lower than Beverly Hills. The mayor and the council of Beverly Hills 2 weeks ago came out and said, hey, public safety is number 1, and we just make sure they're the number 1 paid agency in LA County. And I'm like, okay, great. Now I know I'm gonna get the pressure from the union. But what I talked about to the membership and the officers when it comes to pay, and I've talked a lot too with management and the city manager. One of the things that is hard for me is housing for police officers is very difficult in Torrance. If you want to have your first home, it's going to be a starter kit, and it's probably going to be a condo, right? If you want to be here, but the quality of life is great. But I do have a lot of officers that are starting to move out to Orange County because they want to have a home. So not only what can I do as a chief to win talent, but what can I do to maintain talent here in the organization? And one of the things that I talk a lot about to our officers, and I haven't had a good argument against me yet, is we have one thing in particular that's a competitive advantage against a lot of these other cities, and that is community support. The community support here, and that doesn't mean that Torrance residents hey, TBD, do whatever you want, right? There's a lot of accountability there, but it's also the residents understanding the value that the police department can offer to the community, and a lot of communities don't have that. And when I tell that to officers, you have community support here that you won't find anywhere else, they're like, yeah, you're right. When other organizations come in to help us with traffic enforcement or a special event, they come back afterwards and go, we can't believe the support you guys have. People waved at me. They said, thank you. They said, thank you to me. I'm like, yeah, that's Torrance. So yeah, there's some things there, but what we have is this room. And that's serious. That's a competitive advantage that me as a chief, I'm like, that's what keeps them here so much, is the community that they're able to serve. And that really does go a long way. I think that's a great way to close it out. When you do see the men and women that are out there, and if you mean it, if you are thankful or they did a good job. If they didn't, definitely get a hold of Ron. They did do a good job. But that is really the core value here that keeps them here, is to be able to serve this community. And what we've been seeing lately is we've been getting a lot of laterals come from other agencies. And I'm like, hey, so there's a lateral at the sheriff department or LAPD or whatever. Why are you coming here? And they go, because I live here. And this is such a good community. I want to really be a part of it. And so that really is, for me as a chief, one of the most important things I think it's good for you to know. The impact that you have on keeping quality talent here in the community. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Chief J. Hart and Ron Sellery. So that concludes our meeting, and if please take a cookie and water with you so we can get rid of it all. It doesn't come home with me. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, remember the name? Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Anything